Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I will be talking about which regiments are the best suited for competitive play. I have already technically made this video, but I was informed in the comments that I missed a few things, so I figured I would remake the video. I want to make the best content possible and I figured I would take another look at the stuff that I had missed and make a revised list. This time around, I will analyze everything the regiments have to offer when it comes to units, stratagems, warlord traits, relics, characters, regimental orders, and of course the regimental doctrines. This video is going to be a list format going from the regiment I think is the least optimal for competitive to the ones that I think are the best. Keep in mind, no matter the placement of the regiment on this list, you can do well and win with any regiment in competitive games as long as you have built your list around your regiment's strengths. All this list is for is to give my opinion on which regiments I think are more optimal for playing in competitive and which regiments will give you a better chance at winning because their numbers are just better when it comes to either damage output or survivability. Also, if I mentioned that a warlord trait or relic for a specific regiment isn't that good, you can always swap it out for one of the generic ones. But I am not going to include the generic stuff in the decisions of the placings on this list because I am basing this list off of everything unique the regiment has to offer. Because if it's not unique, it also helps the other regiments on this list, which would cancel it out for everybody. So I think I about covered all of the explanations for how this video and list is going to work, so let's not waste any more of your time and let's dive right in. Number 8. Armageddon. Their doctrine is rapid fire at 18 inches, which is actually pretty good. It keeps your army farther away, and combined with stuff like plasma guns, you can actually do some damage with your little guys. The other half of their doctrine is that tanks in the regiment don't suffer -1 AP when being shot at by weapons that have a -1 AP. In my opinion, this is super situational and not very good against most armies. The weapons that normally get shot at tanks are at least -2 or -3, so ignoring the AP from -1 weapons isn't that great because most of the weapons that have a -1 AP are anti-infantry, and they will most likely be shooting at your infantry instead of your tanks. Meaning, unless you're playing against someone spamming autocannons, this part of the doctrine is basically useless. As for their stratagem, you can pay 1 command point to have an infantry squad re-roll 1s when exiting a vehicle. You combine this with their 18-inch rapid fire, and you give them the order 1st rank, 2nd rank, which means you're getting double rapid fire from 18 inches away, which seems pretty good. The regimental order is to be able to embark into a vehicle after shooting, which can be handy if you want to deny kill points or just protect some of your guys. As for the Warlord trait, you can give your Warlord +1 attack and +1 to his wound rolls, which sounds good, but then you remember you're playing Imperial Guard who aren't that good in close combat. Overall, I think these guys are actually a little bit better than I first thought. I think this regiment is actually pretty decent with the couple combos they have, but I think they still fall short compared to the other regiments. But like I mentioned earlier, just because I have this regiment at number 8 doesn't mean that it isn't good or can't do well in competitive. I just think the regiments farther down the list have better things to offer that would help them win games more consistently. Number 7. Mordian. Their doctrine is a +1 to leadership and a +1 to overwatch when your models are standing in base contact with each other, or when your tanks are within 3 inches of each other. This is actually pretty strong against melee armies, but that means it's situational and only really applies in matchups against melee armies. Against other gun lines, this doctrine isn't that great. The relic is a 4+ feel no pain for any infantry model, which sounds good until you remember your characters shouldn't be getting shot at or wounded anyways, and if they are, you messed up somewhere in your game to allow that. The only real use for this relic is against snipers, which actually makes it pretty decent to keep your warlord alive since feel no pain rolls also work against mortal wounds. The regimental order is for a unit to be able to fire rapid fire weapons at a character even if it isn't the closest, which is pretty cool. The Warlord trait is also pretty good. Whenever a model from a unit within 6 inches of the Warlord tries to flee, on a 4+ that model doesn't flee. This gives back some of the staying power Guard used to have before the Conscript and Commissar nerf, and it allows you to protect your gun line with your screens much better than other regiments. Their stratagem is okay too. It's basically death to the False Emperor for shooting, meaning they get extra shots when they roll a 6 to hit, which can be combined with their order to shoot at a character if needed. Overall, I think this regiment is actually pretty good, but again, I feel like the regiments higher up on this list have better things to offer to make the army more consistent. Number 6. Vostroyan. The doctrine for Vostroyans gives them an extra 6 inches on their weapons, which is actually pretty damn good. Guard always want to be far away from their opponent, and this helps you get a little bit farther. The relic buffs a character and makes him toughness 4 and gives him a 2-up save, which is great against snipers but falls short compared to the other relics. Their Warlord trait gives rerolls of failed hit and failed wound rolls for your Warlord, which again is not that great because you don't really want your Warlord in close combat. You want him buffing the rest of your army, since most characters in Imperial Guard are all about buffing your actual army and providing support. So anything that just buffs the character itself isn't that optimal, since you don't really use your characters like beat sticks like you would in some other armies. Their unique stratagem is that you can pick a unit and add 1 to its hits rolls, which means your unit is getting Space Marine ballistic skill, which is always nice. And it does say unit, which means you can put it on any of your tanks or even your giant tanks like a Baneblade or a Stormlord. Combine this with the extra 6 inches of range, you actually get a pretty nasty combo going. The Regiment Doctrine allows for the targeted unit to fire all of its weapons within 1 inch of the enemy, meaning they can shoot while in close combat with all of their weapons, which is pretty nifty. Although depending on the situation, leaving the combat and getting the order back in the fight might be more optimal because the rest of your army can also then target that unit that you were just in combat with. Overall, I think this army is actually pretty damn good and only slightly falls short to the next 2 armies on the list. Number 5. Talon. The doctrine for Talon allows them to move and then shoot with all of their weapons with no penalties. And for Titanic vehicles, they change their heavy weapons to assault weapons when they move. This makes the army extremely fast and deadly, which is always a good thing. The stratagem allows you to deep strike up to 3 units from the army, meaning it also has a decent alpha strike potential. But if you use tanks to get off that alpha strike and then you whiff the alpha strike, those tanks are either dead or getting charged and never shooting again. Or you can use the stratagem to place down a couple of units of conscripts to deny tons of area and provide a screen for your screen. Guard has a hard time leaving their deployment zone, but Talon don't care about that. With the stratagem, they can apply pressure and board presence from turn 1, forcing their opponent's hand. Or they can have a great alpha strike, which can net them a big advantage early on. The Warlord Trait allows units within 6 inches of the Warlord to charge even if they fell back, which is useful to help keep units tied up that you don't want attacking other units, if you think your conscript squad or whatever you're going to charge them with can hold them off and survive it. Their relic is a stronger power sword, so it's basically useless in this army since you want to be a gun line and your warlord should never be in close combat. And the regiment orders allows a unit to move 6 inches before or after it shoots, and for vehicles it doesn't affect how far they moved for grinding advance. This gives a ton of more mobility to an already mobile army, making this army by far the most mobile of all the regiments. So if you value board control and speed, then this regiment would be a good one to pick up for competitive. Number 4. Cadia. The Jungle Fighters come in at number 4, and to be honest, they could have easily been number 3 or number 2. It just comes down to my opinion, so I placed them at number 4. The doctrine for the army is that all infantry get +1 strength, meaning they are strength 4, which is great for your screening units when they get charged, meaning they can actually hit back decently. And the other half of the doctrine is that every time a vehicle fires a weapon that has a random number of shots, they can re-roll the number of shots if they would like. This makes the army great with battle cannon Leman Russes, with screening guardsmen or conscripts. The stratagem Cadia have is okay, but not that great. You can pay 1 command point to cause D3 mortal wounds to a unit that charge your Cadians, which again is okay, but gets outclassed by the other regiment stratagems. Their Warlord Trait has to do with close combat, so again, not all that useful. And their relic is another stronger power sword, so not much to talk about there. The regiment order is that they can re-roll the random amount of hits for flamer weapons, and it also negates the bonuses for your opponent's saving throws. This is okay, but I feel like it wouldn't be too optimal compared to the other generic orders. So with all these negatives, why do I place the army so high on this list over regiments like Talon and Vostroyan? It's because the Cadia have a unique character named Harker. Harker allows rerolls of 1s for all Cadia units, meaning this aura works on tanks. So you surround him with your choice of tanks that make use of the doctrine, and you should put out a massive amount of damage. Overall, I think this is one of the better regiments, mainly because of their doctrine is so good, especially when combined with Harker, which gives them a lot of damage potential. Number 3. Valhallen. Now I know some people might disagree with this one, but hear me out. Remember when Guard was unbeatable because they had the cheapest infantry in the game that was also immune to morale? Meaning if you had any melee in your army, it was basically useless if the Guard deployed correctly? Well, that shit still exists with Valhallen. Their doctrine is that when their models flee from morale, only half of them flee. So if 10 of your conscripts are supposed to run away, only 5 do. But that's not even the good part, which I'll get into in a second. The other half of the doctrine is for vehicles, and it states that for the purposes of movement and shooting, you pretend that each tank has double the wounds it has. Meaning, your tanks will almost always be firing at full ballistic skill, which is huge. Now here's the good part. They have a relic that you can give to a character, which makes all infantry within 6 inches only lose 1 model to morale, which brings guard back to how it was pre-commissar and pre-conscript nerf. So as long as you conga line your guys properly, you have fearless conscripts again. The Warlord Trait is only a 5+ feel no pain, so not that great, especially if you put it on a tank. It changes it to a 6+ feel no pain. And the regiment order is pretty sweet and synergizes well with their fearless relic and doctrine. The order allows for a unit to fire into close combat at enemies, but for rolls of 1, you hit your own guys that are in the combat. This is great for keeping enemy units locked in combat with your fearless models while you chip away at the unit with the rest of your army. Overall, I think Valhallen are pretty good and definitely the most resilient regiment. So if you like resiliency, then Valhallen is the regiment for you. Number 2, Militarum Tempestus. These guys have been great since the beginning of 8th edition, since the majority of the army can deep strike, making this regiment a great alpha strike army. They also have a rule that they can be thrown into any other regiment detachment without messing up that regiment's doctrines, so they fit in almost any guard army, and I would use them in almost every guard army. The strength of the army doesn't come from the codex rules, it comes from the fact that the army hits on 3s compared to the regular guard's BS of 4. And again, the whole army can deep strike, meaning you can go turn 1 with minimal casualties and then drop in and blow some stuff up. They did get some new rules with the codex though, that does help them a bit if you play them on their own. But to be honest, I never would play them on their own. I would always play them alongside another regiment to complement them. But just in case you do play them on your own, this is what you get. Their doctrine is that if they are shooting within half the range of their weapon, they get extra shots if they roll a 6 to hit. It's nothing too strong, but it still helps the army a tiny bit. The stratagem they have access to lets them shoot at a unit on your opponent's turn if they deep strike within 12 inches of your Tempestus units. This is great against armies that like to deep strike, like against other Militarum Tempestus armies or Grey Knight armies. The Warlord Trait allows your Warlord to attempt to deny 1 psychic ability per turn. This is okay, like it's useful, but you will most likely already have a Psyker in your army that can already do this. And the Relic allows one of your characters to give a second order on a roll of a 2+, which is pretty good. Their unique order is pretty damn good too. You can re-roll failed wound rolls when targeting a monster or vehicle. This really helps their deep striking units kill big models more reliably, which is what the infantry and Tempestus usually aim to do with either overcharged plasmas or meltas. Overall, this army is really strong, but again, I feel like they complement the other regiments a lot more, and you will most likely never see a full Tempestus army. You will most likely always see them paired up with one of the other regiments, since of course you can fit them in the other regiments without losing your benefits. The only reason I gave them the number 2 spot is because you will almost always see Tempestus in every guard list, because the units they have are really good. Not because of the special rules, but because of their base stats and also the deep strike. So that means the number 1 spot goes to Cadia! Cadia by far is the strongest of all the regiments. Everything they have access to is just so good, and when combined with Militarum Tempestus, they become even stronger. The regimental doctrine is that all Cadians, including tanks, can reroll 1s when they don't move. This then changes to reroll all failed hits if you give the unit the order that normally lets them reroll 1s, but because they already reroll 1s, they now reroll all failed hits. This means if you built your list properly, you should have enough commanders to give commands to all of your units, so your whole army should be rerolling all failed hits, meaning you basically have a giant chapter master buffing your whole army for free. On top of that, they have probably the best relic in the game. It is called the Vengeance for Lost Cadia, which allows all units within 12 inches of the bearer of the relic to reroll all failed hits and wounds against models with the Chaos keyword for 1 turn. So if you deployed properly and have everything conga line to be within that 12 inches, your whole army basically has a free Guilliman buff for 1 turn. And as we all know, Chaos is the strongest and most popular faction right now in the current meta, so this relic is amazing. It's a great tool for helping to kill the Chaos Primarchs. And to add to how good Cadians have it, let's now discuss their stratagem. Overlapping Fields of Fire is 2 command points, but totally worth it. Once an enemy model has suffered an unsaved wound from one of your Cadian units, you pay the 2 command points to allow the rest of your Cadians in your army to get a +1 to their ballistic skill when shooting at that unit. This is great, especially at bigger targets like Magnus or Mortarion. If you get just 1 wound through early, you can then fire most of your army at that target with a better ballistic skill, meaning you will get more hits and most likely do more damage. To top it all off, the Cadian order is to reroll the number of shots for any turret weapons that shoot random shots. So if you don't like the number of shots you rolled, you can reroll. And their Warlord Trait allows the Warlord to give the same order to 2 different units on the roll of a 4+, meaning you have a 50% chance to get some extra orders in that you normally wouldn't have had. All this combined makes the best regiment that Guard has to offer. The typical Guard playstyle is to sit still and shoot your opponent off the table. This regiment synergizes with that perfectly because Cadians want to sit still so they can re-roll all their failed hits, which adds a lot of consistency for the damage output that the army has. So by far, Cadia is the best regiment in my opinion, and it's why we see mostly Cadian lists with some Scions on the top tables of ITC tournaments. Well anyways, that's going to be it for this guide today. Hopefully I was able to teach you guys some stuff about Imperial Guard, and hopefully you have a better understanding of the regiments. Remember, just because a regiment is low on this list does not mean that it's bad or that you can't win with it in competitive games. It just means that I personally think the other armies have better options and are more optimal to consistently win games against all other armies. If I forgot anything, please let me know down in the comments below like you guys did last time. And thanks for the critiques and criticisms because it really does help me make better content for you guys. Just please do it in a respectful way and I promise I'll always respond. And also, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're already subscribed but enjoy the content, if you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so through Patreon. A pledge of $4 gets you access to the patron-only Discord channel for Almost Pro Gaming, where you can talk to either me or any of the other Almost Pro gamers to get advice or help when it comes to Warhammer 40k. Well anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and I will see you in the next one. Happy wargaming!